What's up, y'all? Excuse me today. I got a little sniffles, allergy season and whatnot. But Spirit told me to go ahead and do this book reading. I'm going to start with a scripture reading. I just open the book and read from where I land. So this is Ezekiel 46 and 12. Now, when the prince shall prepare a voluntary burnt offering or peace offering voluntarily unto the Lord, one shall then open him the gate that looketh toward the east, and he shall prepare his burnt offering and his peace offerings as he did on the Sabbath day. Then he shall go forth, and after his going forth, one shall shut the gate. Thou shalt daily prepare a burnt offering unto the Lord of a lamb of the first year without blemish. Thou shalt prepare it every morning, and thou shalt prepare a meat offering for it every morning, the sixth part of an ephah, and the third part of an hin of oil, to temper with the fine flour, a meat offering continually by a perpetual ordinance unto the Lord. Thus shall they prepare the lamb and the meat offering and the oil every morning for a continual burnt offering. Thus saith the Lord God, if the prince give a gift unto any of his sons, the inheritance thereof shall be his sons, it shall be their possession by inheritance. But if he give a gift of his inheritance to one of his servants, then it shall be his to the year of liberty. After it shall return to the prince, but his inheritance shall be his sons for them. Moreover, the prince shall not take of the people's inheritance by oppression, to thrust them out of their oppression, but he shall give his sons inheritance out of his own possession, that my people be not scattered every man from his possession. After he brought me through the entry which was at the side of the gate into the holy chambers of the priests, which looked toward the north, and behold, there was a place on the two sides westward. Then said he unto me, this is the place where the priests shall boil the trespass offering and the sin offering, where they shall bake the meat offering, that they bear them not out into the utter court to sanctify the people. Then he brought me forth into the utter court, and caused me to pass by the four corners of the court. And behold, in every corner of the court there was a court. In the four corners of the court there were courts joined of 40 cubits long and 30 broad. These four corners were of one measure. And there was a row of building round about them four, and it was made with boiling places under the rows round about. Then said he unto me, these are the places of them that boil, where the ministers of the house shall boil the sacrifice of the people. Chapter 47. Afterward he brought me again unto the door of the house, and behold, waters issued out from under the threshold of the house eastward, for the forefront of the house stood toward the east. And the waters came down from under the right side of the house at the south side of the altar. Then brought he me out of the way of the gate northward, and led me about the way without unto the utter gate by the way that looketh eastward. And behold, there ran out waters on the right side. And when the man that had the line in his hand went forth eastward, he measured 1,000 cubits, and he brought me through the waters. The waters were to the ankles. Again, he measured 1,000, and brought me through the waters. The waters were to the knees. Again, he measured 1,000, and brought me through. The waters were to the loins. Afterward, he measured 1,000, and it was a river that I could not pass over, for the waters were risen, waters to swim in, a river that could not be passed over. And he said unto me, Son of man, hast thou seen this? Then he brought me and caused me to return to the brink of the river. Now when I had returned, behold, at the bank of the river were very many trees on the one side and on the other. Then said he unto me, these waters issue out toward the east country, and go down into the desert, and go into the sea, which being brought forth into the sea, the waters shall be healed. And it shall come to pass that everything that liveth, which moveth, whithersoever the river shall come, shall live. And there shall be a very great multitude of fish, because these waters shall come thither. for they shall be healed, and everything shall live whither the river cometh. And it shall come to pass that the fishers shall stand upon it from En Gedi even unto En Eglaim. They shall be a place to spread forth nets. Their fish shall be according to their kinds, as the fish of the great sea, exceeding many. But the miry places thereof and the marishes thereof shall not be healed. They shall be given to salt. And by the river upon the bank thereof, on this side and on that side, shall grow all trees for meat, whose leaf shall not fade, neither shall the fruit thereof be consumed. It shall bring forth new fruit according to his months, because their waters they issued out of the sanctuary. And the fruit thereof shall be for meat, and the leaf thereof for medicine. Thus saith the Lord God, this shall be the border, whereby ye shall inherit the land according to the 12 tribes of Israel. Joseph shall have 2 portions, and ye shall inherit it, one as well as another, concerning the which I lifted up mine hand to give it unto your fathers, and this land shall fall unto you for inheritance. And this shall be the border of the land toward the north side, from the great sea, the way of Hethlon, as men go to Zedad, Hamath, Berothah, Sibraim, which is between the border of Damascus and the border of Hamath, Hazar Hatticon, which is by the coast of Haran. And the border from the sea shall be Hazar Enan, the border of Damascus, and the northward, and the border of Hamath. And this is the north side. And the east side ye shall measure from Haran, and from Damascus, and from Gilead, and from the land of Israel by Jordan, from the border unto the east sea, and this is the east side. And the south side southward, from Tamar, even to the waters of strife in Kadesh, the river to the great sea, and this is the south side southward. The west side also shall be the great sea from the border, till a man come over against Hamath. This is the west side. So shall ye divide this land unto you according to the tribes of Israel. And it shall come to pass that ye shall divide it by lot for an inheritance unto you, and to the strangers that sojourn among you, which shall beget children among you, and they shall be unto you as born in the country among the children of Israel. They shall have inheritance with you among the tribes of Israel. And it shall come to pass that in what tribe the stranger sojourneth, there shall ye give him his inheritance, saith the Lord. And that is strangers that don't know they're Israel, not heathens. Okay, so let's continue in this book, Against the Apocalypse. Broken tablets and flying letters. Let us weep, let us cry. The Reb of Kapizinek was safe in Hamburg, vacationing at the spas when the Great War began. As the Russians drew near his opulent home in Galicia, the Reb sent for Lip Schwager, a Hasidic dealer in rare books, and entrusted him with the mission to rescue his most cherished possession, a letter written in 1753 by the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism. All his other property, valued at several million crowns, could go to waste as far as the Reb was concerned, so long as the Baal Shem Tov's letter was salvaged. Schwager set out on his mission and arrived in Kapezinek a few hours before the Russian army. He had just enough time to hide the letter in a tin box and bury it under a cellar wall with some of the Reb's gold and silver. With the Russians suspecting him of espionage, Schwager would not return to the cellar for several months. When he did, he found the wall dismantled and the treasure gone. Schwager was beside himself. He tried again a few days later and, to his great joy, discovered the tin box with the letter. But when he opened the box, the letter was blank. Lip Schwager related his story in 1917 to S. Ansky, who was supervising a relief effort on behalf of a Galician Jewry. Ansky's prior career as an ethnographer made him skeptical of a story too well told and all the more curious to see the evidence. The letter, when produced, was indeed blank. I've heard it said, Schwager admitted, that dampness caused the writing to disappear and that by chemical means it can be restored. But we, Hasidism, have a different view of the matter, a very different view. Whereas the Hasidic book dealer saw this as a mystical omen, Ansky's interpretation was analogical. The episode reminded him of something else he had seen on his first mission to Galicia, the desecrated synagogue in Dimbitz, in which all that remained of the Ten Commandments over the Holy Ark were the words Tirzah, thou shalt kill, and Tanakh, thou shalt commit adultery. According to Ansky, the situation in 1915, in the immediate wake of the pogroms and atrocities, had been one of superficial destruction. Though no Jewish household in the path of the advancing Russian army had been left intact, Jews had withstood the suffering stoically. The tragedy had not broken their spirit. It was as if the tablets of the law, proud symbols of a Jewish collective united under God, had been shattered, the pieces remaining as testimony. Destruction could not shake the pride of a people who had once been given such tablets and who lived by their commandments, even as the shards lay scattered. But now, after 2 full years of occupation, epic grandeur had given way to routine degradation. A heroic people had been reduced to a motley of professional beggars. The letters of the Holy Scroll had flown off, leaving the parchment naked. In Hadrianic times, as Ansky remembered from his Hader years, the martyred Rabbi Hanina ben Tardian had counseled his daughter that the Torah scroll might be consumed together with his flesh, but that the spirit of the Torah was indestructible. Ansky invoked the image precisely to contest the notion of spiritual inviolability. Once the letters were gone, the sanctums vanished too. To view the pogrom victims with anything but reverence was a radical departure from the traditional Jewish responses to catastrophe. To make sense of the immediate event in terms of ancient texts, to seize upon the symbols of past holiness, to highlight the present sacrilege was, on the other hand, the very essence of tradition. Ansky's was the third generation in a succession of Jewish intellectuals in Eastern Europe whose basic loyalties were challenged in the crucible of destruction. So long as there were Jews faithful to their Hasidic masters, the old myths, heroes, and strategies were never abandoned. To the masses of traditional Jews, history was still the hieroglyphic of the holy. In Hasidic thought, especially, the mediation of the Tzaddik guaranteed the preeminence of transcendent experience in human life. Whenever a Tzaddik was implicated in real, that is, verifiable historical events, his powers of intercession dominated the plot. In 1753, 24 Jews were charged with the ritual murder of a Christian boy. Half of the suspects were tortured and executed, and the rest converted to Christianity. The Hasidic imagination recast this grotesque occurrence into a perfect hagiographic tale. The date or details of the trial and execution were of no concern to the storyteller, who simply recounted that there was a blood libel in the holy community of Pavlish and conveyed the news third hand through the narrator, who heard it from Rabbi David, who received a letter written by someone in Pavlish. Rabbi David escaped in time and came as far as the Baal Shem Tov's residence in Metshebash, a town in the Ukraine. The Betched Baal Shem Tov told him several times that the people would be saved, but they were killed. And afterward, a letter reached Rabbi David telling him about the horrible and painful tortures that each of them had suffered. Such an oblique telling shifted the focus away from the event, leaving the Besht and his dramatic foil, Rabbi David, to sort out its meaning. The time frame of the story now switches from the undifferentiated past to the specific moment when the news arrives. Our attention is riveted on the Betshit's reaction, for on the surface, his prophetic and intercessionary powers appear to have failed. The letter comes on Sabbath Eve, normally the time of great rejoicing. Everything the Besh does that evening violates the norm. He cries bitterly in the ritual bath. He prays the reception of the Sabbath prayer and the Ma'ariv evening service with a bitter heart. He weeps as he sanctifies the wine. He retires to his room before partaking of any food, lies down on the floor, and instructs the members of his household to eat without him. The Besht is greatly grieved over the death of the martyrs. The transition to darkness signals the third act in the drama. The candles have burnt out, it is midnight, and the Besht is still stretched out on the floor. His dutiful wife is lying on her bed, and Rabbi David is fighting off sleep on the other side of the bedroom door. In this appropriate dream state, all three characters are ready to experience the visitation of the martyrs. The anonymous martyrs of Pavlish, headed by Rabbi Akiva, tell their story with the requisite tripling effect of the folktale. They describe the three ascending levels of the heavenly palaces they have visited and the three levels of suffering that a human soul can endure. Man suffers on earth in his daily life, martyrs suffer under torture, and the dead suffer in Gehenna or hell. Say the martyrs, that half hour in Gehenna makes all other suffering seem like the skin of a garlic clove in comparison. Coming back to the initial puzzle, the best inability to foretell and annul the decree, the martyrs hasten to assure him, "You, sir, are not aware of your power. When you, sir, upset the Sabbath, there was a great tumult in paradise." That is to say, the best intercession had an overwhelming impact not on the transitory plane of history, but on the ultimate domain of heaven. The best remains the unrivaled intermediary between God and man. His prayers and sorrows are felt throughout the worlds and heaven. His is not a private, but a cosmic personality. In the layered world of Hasidism, the heavens and the earth are fluid, though only the Zadik can remain on earth even as he rises on the ladder of holiness up to God, or receive visitors from the true world even as he lies prostrate within the world of illusion. The blood libel in Pavlish takes its place alongside the martyrdom of the 10 rabbis whose death sentence, according to the Elah Ezkerah prayer recited on Yom Kippur, likewise withstood the intercession of the great Rabbi Ishmael. The balance sheet of heaven and earth is sometimes better kept if the Zadik holds his cosmic powers in check. The Hasidism viewed every act of outside intervention as an evil decree. Each time government action threatened the religious and social autonomy of the Jewish body politic, a delegation of Hasidic and other Orthodox leaders headed for the capital while the loyal flock at home crowded into houses of prayer. One such delegation met in Warsaw in 1790 to appeal the reform plans of the Polish parliament, which were then under consideration. Local Hasidic legend later told of the visit by delegate Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Bardashev, born circa 1740, and pointed to a pillar in the study house on Wagner Street, next to which the had stood as he bestowed a threefold blessing on the house, that the students studying there never suffer from the code, that they be spared from the hands of the Gentiles, that is, from the draft, and that there never be any fires in the surrounding courtyards. Competing with the religious and communal leaders for the government's attention at the end of the 18th and beginning of the 19th century were a tiny group of masculine, Westernizing Jews who increasingly looked to intervention and even coercion as a necessary means of achieving progress in the Eastern European backwater. Mendel Levin, born 1749, was among the pioneers, a friend of Moses Mendel, Mendelssohn, and a man with powerful connections in the Polish Sejm parliament. He too was in Warsaw in 1790 to 91, where he issued a French brochure advocating a number of moderate reforms. In it, he mentioned the recent visit of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak and compared his attempts at intercessionary prayer to a similar episode in Christian hagiography. Maïs comme le rôle de Saint-Simon de sa colonne ne lui ressuit pas ici bien il décampe. As his playing at, at as his playing at Saint Simon on his pillar was of no avail here either, he left. Polyglots and superb propagandists, the masculine knew how to address each audience in its own idiom. The burlesque, the Hasidic leader, Levin had only to invoke a famous Christian saint of the 5th century who had once intervened successfully in church affairs by standing atop a pillar in the desert. For Hasidism, the pillar of Bagna Street remained proof of the Tzadik's true powers. The study house, after all, had not burned down even a century later, for the masculine appealing to his Gentile audience, who presumably believed that Simon was miraculously successful, the true efficacious pillar of Christian lore would cancel out the counterfeit pillar of Hasidic faith. The levity of this literacy face-off between Mendel Levin and Levi Yitzchak should not obscure the radical nature of the Maskalic agenda. The Maskalim accepted non-Jewish thought and mores as at least equal in authority to the teachings and practices of Jewish tradition, and they threw their weight behind the fundamental reform of Jewish life in line with Western ideas of progress. When Tsarist rule was imposed upon the majority of Eastern European Jews following the dismemberment of Poland at the end of the 18th century, the stakes in this contest rose significantly. The draft decree of 1827, dreaded for so long, was the first great test of collective will, and as the Jewish polity reeled under the blows, the masculine, for the most part, stood by and applauded. In and of itself, the draft would have met with resistance on the part of a people who had no stake in Russian society, let alone in its military enterprise, because minors were drafted into Cantonist battalions, special military training units, followed by a full 25-year term of service when they reached majority. The period 1827 to 1855 was the most divisive in the history of Russian Jewry in the 19th century, reaching a crescendo of anarchy in the last 3 years of Tsar Nicholas's rule. Nicholas, a great believer in the military as an agency of social control in the case of the Jews, was additionally motivated by missionary zeal. Of the estimated 70,000 Jews conscripted during this period, about 50,000 were minors, many under 12 years of age when they were caught, and at least half of this latter group were forcibly baptized. Under Russian feudalism, Jews were still treated as a corporate entity. Taxes were levied against the group, not against each individual, and draft quotas were to be filled by the Kahal, or the pronounced Kul, the Jewish Community Council. For reasons of its own, the Kahal, or the Kul, preferred drafting children to drafting their fathers, and filled the rest of the adult quota with the poor, the unemployed, and the generally undesirable. The quotas were enforced by a new breed of men, some Christian, mostly Jewish, who kidnapped the children in broad daylight on their way to school, or if need be, from their mother's arms in the dead of night. The kidnappers were called capers or coppers, or Lovshiks from the Russian. In fairy tales, these names replace the wicked witch or the devil himself, and there could be no greater insult among adults than to be taunted with a caper's name. When the law of 1853 allowed the Kahal to induct any Jew traveling without a passport, there was nothing to stop roaming bands of professional capers, not even a valid passport. Yekutiel Berman, born 1825, remembered traveling in this period with a loaded revolver. The community was torn apart. Capers preyed on the populace. The community railed against its leaders. The rich exploited the poor. One region kidnapped Jews from the next. A Jew from Congress, Poland, who happened to cross into the Russian provinces on a visit, was fair game. Military might was pitted against civilians. Christians were set against Jews. The home became a battleground as parents tried to fight off the kidnappers. Captured recruits were sometimes kept prisoner in their own town until the draft quota was filled and the army ready to claim its victims. Even those exempted by law were safe, since the communal lists were doctored in such a way that the only sons of the poor were drafted in lieu of the several sons of the well-to-do. Like the Judenrat, a century later, the leaders of the Kahal or Kul oversaw this demoralization, forced to choose who would live and who would never return. A keen sense of desecration A keen sense of desecration pervades the songs and memories of this period. On the simplest level, the songs convey the decree of common despair through discordant rhymes. One famous song tells of a draft dodger who finds refuge on the outskirts of town with strange Jews who hide him in a pit. After 3 days, weakened by hunger, he reappears in their home. The mistress of the house puts a piece of bread on the table as he prepares to eat. With proper ablution and blessing, he hears ominous noises outside. He'd gotten so far as the first word of the prayer when in came a mob after his head. The bread remains, and the lad is carted off to town where his mother rushes before the council members to plead on his behalf. What kind of world can this be when an only child is sold for money? From the folk perspective, soldiering in and of itself was an act of apostasy. Soldiers were called Yevonim, literally Ionians or Greeks in Jewish code. This immediately conjured up the ancient polarity between Jerusalem and Athens. To sing of Jewish Yevonim, therefore, was itself a contradiction in terms, underscored by the rhyme Ishur Derabanim, a rabbinic prohibition. The prohibitions we follow are the prohibitions of our elders. Let us sing a song of Jewish soldiers. They cut off our beards and our side curls, violate our Sabbaths and festivals. The religious freedom of the Jewish recruits was flagrantly violated. Many were subjected to torture until they agreed to convert, and the Tsarist regime would not allow converts to return to their despicable faith. Greater yet was the listener's sense of outrage when it was the rabbonim or rabbis who rhymed with the crime. Little children are torn from their lessons and pressed into coats that have soldiers' buttons. Our rabbis, our big shots are in cahoots, teaching our kids to be recruits. For a recruit faced with exile and apostasy, even the most trying aspects of life at home seemed jolly by comparison. Better to study Bible and Rashi than eating the soldier's mush. Jewish parents reaffirmed the traditional value of learning Chumash mit Rashi by intensifying the religious education of their sons as a buffer to conversion and in the hope that the Kahal might spare the better students. All this served effectively to undermine the authority of the Kahal, which was soundly attacked from all sides by the government, which held it accountable for an ever growing number of recruits, by the common folk, who sometimes rioted and sometimes denounced its misdeeds to the authorities, and by the masculine, who argued that conscription, even in so harsh a form, was a necessary prelude to emancipation, and that only the Kahal and the rabbis were to blame for any excesses in its operation. In the scheme of masculine memory and artistic persuasion, the scene of desecration, the place where the laws of the land and of the Torah were violated with impunity, the locus of evil was not St. Petersburg, but the local Kahal chamber and synagogue. It was here, according to Isaac Bayer Levinson, writing in 1851, that 12 pious Jews were forced to swear falsely on the Torah. Knowing that a poor man in town had an only son 8 years of age, the witnesses swore that the son was really 12, was one of 7 sons of the rich man in town, and was therefore eminently fit for the draft. In Cantonist times, the practice called a kuv hackery, in which anyone, rich or poor, man or woman, could interrupt the reading of the Torah to demand redress for a wrongdoing, was put to dramatic if ineffectual use. The aggrieved mother whose only son had just been drafted would now be shouted down from the platform, and the reading would continue as if nothing had happened. This is what the masculine A.I. Perperna, Judah Lieb Gordon, and Jacob Denison later remembered. The synagogue Jews were deaf even to the woman in Minsk who cried, Lord of the universe, you take pride in our father Abraham because he readily sacrificed his son on the altar. Order me to slaughter my only son, and I will do it at once. But could you prevail upon Abraham to give Isaac up for conversion? Both the folk and the masculine of that generation, for very different reasons, turned their anger and their energies inward and absolved the higher authorities, God or the Tsar, of responsibility. The rhymed couplet of this chapter's epigraph, which dates from around mid century, reflects the common man's perception that the Tsar would intervene if only he knew what evils were being perpetrated in his name. It was the internal authority structure, in other words, with its ethos of communal solidarity, which had been so badly shaken by the draft decrees. If Cantonism was a central link in the chain of Jewish suffering, it was because, in the words of one grandmother, not even the Tokeha listed among its curses the possibility of Jews being kidnapped by other pious Jews. The masculine, for their part, had everything pinned on the good graces of the government, which alone could promote the linear progress of history. Had not the government proved its noble intentions by opening 2 rabbinic seminaries for the training of a new enlightened leadership, and were not the teachers and pupils automatically exempt from the draft? No wonder then that in their topical works of fiction, the masculine could safely disregard the contradictory evidence.